Calcemia.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I would like to thank the organizing committee for the invitation, opportunity to share some of our recent data. So the previous talk set the stage for a lot of my introduction. So there's similar data in the United States that shows that the prevalence of subclinical hypocalcemia can be quite high, and generally is higher in multifidus cows. And there is a tendency to go higher as up to the third, fourth lactation, getting as high as 50% on those cows. And why do we care so much about subclinical hypocalcemia? That's part of what we has presented here. And how that takes place, well, when I was at the University of Florida, my colleague Natalia Martinez did a study where we shown that cows that have subclinical hypocalcemia will have a lower number of neutrophils in their peripheral blood, and then their neutrophils are less effective to do their work. So their ability to do phagocytosis is reduced, their ability to do oxidative burst is reduced. And what we see in parallel to that is that those cows also have problems with energy metabolism. So they have increased levels of non-certified fatty acids, and they have increased levels of beta-hydroxybutyrate, which are markers of negative energy balance and ketosis, respectively. And what we see as a consequence of that is the cows that were going to have a much higher chance to develop metritis or peripheral metritis. The criteria to define those are slightly different to what you saw there, but the idea is that you're going to see a remarkable increase in uterine disease in cows that have subclinical hypocalcemia, and because those cows have increased higher incidence of uterine disease, you see lower fertility. Okay, there has been strategies to prevent subclinical hypocalcemia. So there has been strategic supplementation right at the time of KEV and 24 hours later, and there's also the use of CALCITRIOL at the time of KEV as well. So what those strategies have shown that they can be effective, first to reduce incidence of subclinical hypocalcemia. But when you look at, this is for primiparous and multiparous cows, but when you look at the effects on uterine health and pregnancy outcomes, so there is no improvement on reduced incidence of metritis, and reproductive performance improved in multiparous and reduced in primiparous, so there's some mixed effects. When you look for the calcitriol, they also were able to reduce the incidence of subclinical ketosis with the calcitriol. But then their follow-up study didn't show any improvements on reduce the incidence of metritis and reproductive performance. So the question that I have to pose here is why, even though you improve the incidence of subclinical hypocalcemia, you're not getting that translates into improved uterine health and fertility. So that brings us to my next piece of information I want to share with you. And it is this data from Amir that is here in the audience, and when he was doing his PhD student with Peter Constable, where they shown that the cows that they have developed hypocalcemia, they start to have a decreased levels of calcium now 9 hours before calving, a remarkable decrease. So they will calve at close to their nadir of calcium, and you only start to treat them after that remarkable decrease has happened, which means that there is an important time on which the cow, its calving is going through this process there, the levels of calcium are quite low, and you're not helping them go up with calcium supplementation. You know, the problem to do that, so if you talk to people from very behind, they will discuss with you that some of their calcium products were developed thinking that if you could give it before calving, that would be ideal, but it's hard to predict when calvings occur. Okay, that brings me to the connection is, if you could have a strategy to predict when parturition occur and give that calcium accurately earlier before calving, perhaps you could have a improved calcium metabolism starting sooner, and then the cow would be at the time that she's being exposed to all the pathogens at the time of calving, at the time that they need like effective immune response in the uterus to deal with those pathogens, they might have that. So this MOOCALL is a device that you put in the tail of the cows, and he will measure how much the tail is moving. And according to tail movement, it will give you a text message saying the cow it's close to calve. The claim is that it would do that within about 2 hours before calving occur. And then we designed a study to try to integrate these two ideas. The first hypothesis that we wanted to test is that this MOOCAL prediction of parturition would be associated with plasma calcium profile and clinical signs of impending parturition in cattle. And the second thing you would like to know is if you could supplement calcium, if that would improve metabolism at 24 hours after calving, at early postpartum. Our objectives were to evaluate the MOOCAL prediction of parturition and its association with calcium profile and clinical signs associated with impending parturition, and then to determine if the prepartum supplementation with calcium at the time of the MOOCAL prediction would help improve calcium metabolism. The study was done in one of our commercial dairy farms, so these are a few of the cows that we had in the study. Those cows were in freestyle barns at the time before, so about 3 days before parturition, we placed the device, and we started looking at our phones and trying to wait for the message to go there and see the function of the device. Before parturition, what we were doing, we were collecting blood samples twice a day to evaluate whole blood and plasma calcium levels. We're using a CalCite device to do those, and also we measure blood using atomic absorption or a calcium in plasma using atomic absorption afterwards. And then we use a couple non-signs associated with impending parturition that are not always seen to everyone, but to every cow, but we evaluate the relaxation of the broad ligament, secretion of vaginal mucus, relaxation of the tail, edema of the vulva, and mammary gland signs such as physiological hyperplasia of the udder, edema of the udder, and feeling of the tits. At prediction of parturition, once we got the text message, we would randomly allocate the cows either to receive calcium at the time that we got the prediction, and the other group, we didn't do it. Both groups were receiving at calving, which is a normal management in most farms in the United States. So at calving, most cows will get calcium. So we didn't change that. We just wanted to know if we give it that before, if that would improve at 0 and then at 24, if that was like a carryover effect for that. After parturition, we continue to collect blood samples 24, 48 hours. And then we run a general linear model with repeated measures to look at the effect of calcium blood. And then we look at the effects of calcium interval using an analysis of variation of SAS. And we did some correlation analysis to see if those signs of impending parturition were associated with the MOOCAL prediction of parturition. So first about the MOOCAL, we had, of the cows we studied, approximately half that had some false positives. And I think it's important to mention to you that most of those were associated with when cows were being fed, they were moved to the backs, they would get a little excited, they would move more around, and that was when we got some of the false positives for some of the cows. Of the 13 cows, 6 had false positives. But false negative, a cow that the device didn't tell us, was just one of those. This is just a note about the clinical signs. What we saw was that no matter which sign of the impending parturition, hyperplasia, tail, anything, when we look at the MOOCAL prediction, the results didn't tell us they were very good. The error in the curve was between 0.2 and 0.65, which in other words means they were not highly associated. There was none of those signs that it was a very exciting thing that we could say, let's add them up and use it as a criteria to predict parturition. There is a lot of variability. That's what we saw. This is the time on which each cow that they had the MOOCAL calve after the message. So it varies from 102 minutes to up to 576 minutes. The mean time was 270 minutes. And then the range, as I saw, it's an hour and a half to almost 10 hours, the variability. There was no difference between the cows that received the calcium before at the time of prediction and the other cows. But what we were able to see is that those cows that we intervened earlier, when we look at the the calcium at time of calving and then at 24 hours, we were able to see that that treatment early, based on the prediction of parturition, did help those cows to have increased calcium levels at calving and at 24, and also total plasma calcium in both measurements. So in general, we were able to see that levels of calcium were improved when we did this treatment at the time of prediction of parturition. So what we were able to conclude is the MOOCALL prediction of parturition was accurate for more than 90% of the cows. So most of the cows were identified. There's one actually missed. But there was a wide range than expected, and false positives occur in cows in a significant number. So those false positives, or as I said, mostly associate with when the cows were being moved around the farm, and that's something that you need to consider. But when we use that prediction to supplement calcium, we were able to see that was helpful, and that the prepartum oral calcium supplementation before calving improves the metabolism of calcium at calving and 24 hours, which suggests that this might be a strat that could be used to try to improve calcium metabolism in a strategic time point. I'd like to thank the College of Veterinary Medicine that sponsored the summer research student that conducted this study, Stone Ridge Dairy Farm that allow us to perform the study, and MOOCALL for their assistance, and they let us borrow this device to test it. Okay? With that, I'll be happy to entertain any question.